Hi everyone, welcome to my review of the IM Kinera Verdandi. And Kinera is an interesting brand from China. So that's this chi-fi, but it does have a bit to sort of say for itself to distinguish itself from the usual chi-fi crowd, whether it's their stunning aesthetics, and they do have stunningly aesthetic, beautiful IMs, or the recent foray into high-end flagship territory with the Loki, which was very well received. The Kinera Loki, as a matter of fact, is perhaps one of the better IMs of 2024. In any case, so they're founded in 2011. They're based out of China, and they have been known for their beautiful shells, and they offer a broad spectrum of sound signatures at varying price points. They do have unifying feature in that all of them have an airy treble, which can sound bright to some people. I mean, depending on the IM, of course, some are brighter and some are not so bright. So there is, some variation. They now also have a sister concern. It's a separate company. It's called Queen of Audio, or QOA for short. And QOA is also very impressive. Kinera uses Norse mythology to name their IMs. Like I said, their flagship is called Imperial Loki, which is, of course, named after the big bad antagonist of Asgard, as has been noted by Bongo Bilai, who works with me, and you might have read his headphone review on the Verdandi. He works in my team, so do check out his review if you have not already. So Verdandi is also derived from Old Norse mythology, and I think it means present or happening or something along those lines. And yeah, so it's supposed to sort of talk about events unfolding and choices made by individuals. And yeah, so it's an interesting sort of etymology behind the name. It's $1,200. It's got two Knowles PA drivers, two ESD drivers, one dynamic driver, and it has a bone conduction driver, a BC for lower frequencies. And that does, I think, to some extent, play itself out in how it does bass. An impedance of 14 ohms and sensitivity of 105 dB. So it's pretty standard with regard to its drivability. Now, I don't have access to its box yet. I mean, I was sent its box separately from the IM, so I don't have access to it yet. I mean, I understand it comes in a box that looks like a box of chocolates. It's hexagonal and all that. But I don't have that. I have the stock cable, of course, which I've removed now. This is the stock cable. The stock cable is ergonomically okay, sonically okay. I've paired this with better cables and it's given me better results. This is a nice sort of chin split here, and overall the cable is a nice shade of ice blue or icy blue color. It does have a bit of memory, but nothing too bad. These barrels are pretty premium looking and all that, right? However, I have had far better success in terms of coherence, timbre, and better bass performance when I've switched out to other cables. And I'd like to give a shout out to Astral Audio cables and also this amazing cable, and not that expensive either. It's less than $300 if I'm not mistaken. And this is a cable brand that I think flies under the radar far too often. And this cable, guys, sounds as good as a lot of flagship cables I've heard. This is the Toxic cables, and it's called the Toxic Blue cables if I'm not mistaken, and you must try out Toxic cables. I'll leave a link. This is the Black Widow 22 V3, and you get it in this sort of beautiful shade of indigo, or deep blue, and it doesn't have much memory. It's a pretty thick yet light yet premium looking, with good sort of barrels and very nicely and tastefully done branding. I'm in love with this cable, and more importantly, it's an aesthetic match with the Verdandi, and it does elevate the sound of the Verdandi noticeably. Okay, now the Verdandi comes in different color schemes. Mine is the hollow version, HOLO version, which combines transparent resin, dark submarine blue, and sort of patches of gold or orange-ish gold, right? Which is look very pretty. I'm not sure how well you're able to make out the aesthetics of this. The face plates are very, very, very pretty, and they're see-through on the side, so you can see the dynamic driver and all that. Okay, so looks aside, it's on the larger side. It's not as large as some IMs can be, but it's somewhat on the larger side. There is no driver flex or a pressure buildup that I experience. I had zero comfort issues. However, when you tap this, it does make a sound. I'm not sure if this will come through from the mic. So when you tap this, it does make a sound. It's a twang. And I don't know if that'll bother you. If you're OCD, you might want to keep doing it like I'm doing it now. But it does make that a sound like that if it matters to you. And the twang is from the bone conduction driver, which is one of my friends find this to be a stress reliever, like a fidget spinner, which of course is just a strange thing to say. But yeah, it is what it is. Now, in terms of the Verdandi FR, it's a pretty sort of a safe sounding IM. It does track Harman mostly. It does have a sub bass, sort of a shelf that does have a balance of mid bass, and I would say it's got a little more mid bass than I think what Harman would offer you up. So it's better in that sense from Harman. And then it does come down to the nice 300 hertz sort of a point, and then thereafter it's flat and it starts rising again after around 1 kilohertz. It does have pinna gain between 2 and 3 kilohertz. There's a bit of energy around 5 kilohertz, so lower treble does sound present, which is good because it offers clarity, it brings vocals forward in the mix, it offers up resolution, and it offers up definition of cymbal hits and even lead guitar attack. And female vocals are especially delicious sounding on this IM. And thereafter, after 6 kilohertz, there is some energy. There's a bit of energy around 7 hertz. There's a bit of energy around 11 kilohertz, 7 kilohertz, 11 kilohertz, and again around 15 kilohertz. So, and these sort of pockets of energy don't make it sound sibilant. It does, I think, have a certain rhyme and reason with regard to how these treble peaks, I think, have a way of balancing each other out. And overall, you get an airy, resolving signature, and it sounds linear. I would not say it's a warm sounding IM. I would not say it's a bright sounding IM. I would say it's a fairly linear sounding IM. And I hate using the word neutral because neutral is, a very confusing terminology. It means different things to different people. And what's neutral for metal might not be neutral for hip hop, which might not be neutral for jazz. So I'll just say it's a linear sounding IM. The bass response of the Verdandi is my favorite aspect of this IM. So it's not a particularly hard-hitting IM. It's not particularly tactile or tight, but then it does have very, very good texture. And I do care about bass texture. You might not. You might care more about impact, but this is not the most impactful IM for bass. It's textured, and that's its USP. It's layered, and it's one of the best under $1,500 for its texture and layer. It just sounds natural with kick drums. It sounds fun with rock. It sounds fun with hip hop. It sounds fun with R&B. You have the sensation of sub bass surrounding you, partially because of the BCD, which bypasses, your ears and just does bone conduction. So that does give you the effect of being surrounded by the bass, which is quite fun. The bone conduction here is pretty palpable, literally, and pun intended, I suppose. The mid range is nice. I would say smooth. It's not as in your face as Harman tuned mid ranges can be. I would not say it's lush. I would not say it's overly rich. I would say it's just linear. It's just right. It did not. Kinera is not trying to do warm here. I think they're trying to go for linear here. And it doesn't sound overly thin or too thick or harsh or shouty. The execution is pretty well done because it's very difficult to get mid-range to sound linear, I think. I think a lot of manufacturers will veer towards the warm colored territory, like Fur Audio, and then also Wind Fans. And then you have other IMs like Moondrop, which basically have like very dry and clinical mid-range, which also seems to win fans. Now, treble is interesting. It's not too glassy. It's not too sharp, like I said. It's not too shimmery. But you do need a warm source to bring out the best performance from this. Because if you are very treble sensitive, because this does have air frequency energy, for some people, it can sound fatiguing. It wasn't the case for me, because I also have the luxury of having some warmer sources like this beautiful Sony DAP, this beautiful iBasso PB5 Osprey amp. But it does sound okay with neutral sources like Q-Style CMA 18P, which my friend has. But I wouldn't say that you should be pairing it with brighter sources like iBasso DX3 260, for instance, or most of the iBasso DAPs. iBasso does also have warm DAPs, like the 300 series has some warmth in them, especially the 300 Max TI. But overall, I would say, this does require a certain amount of thinking in terms of what you drive it with, especially if you're treble sensitive. Now, in terms of technicalities, like I talked about, it says resolution. So I do think it's fairly resolving for the price point of $1,100, although I do think the Symphonium IMs are more resolving, but those guys are in a class of their own. The Symphony IMs, I think, can hold their own with $3,000 stuff. So this does justify the price point in terms of the resolution it offers up. So it is adequately resolving for the price point of $1,100. I apologize if you hear some sounds in the background because there's an airplane flying on top of me. Okay, now, in terms of its soundstage and separation, it's quite impressive actually. I would say for soundstage, it's not exactly a Sony IR-Z1R, but Playing Goodbye to Romance by Ozzy Osbourne was a very interesting experience because it just sounds very wide. If the track is mastered to sound wide, this will sound wide. So the width here is very impressive. It's more impressive for the price than I think resolution is, because resolution I think is great but decent for the price. Now, imaging is again decent. There's nothing wrong with imaging. You do get a fair amount of separation of background and foreground and laterally, so you are able to pinpoint and place musicians and performers on the stage, so you get a sense of realism coming through because of its imaging. Nothing is held back in imaging. The BCD does help give the images slightly more flesh and bone, so you do get a sense, especially in the mid bass and sub bass, that images do sound a bit tall and on the taller side. Now, timbrally, it's okay. I think timbrally it does sound coherent. It's not as amazing as single dynamic drivers can be, even cheaper ones, or like, let's say for example, the Camphor Audio single dynamic driver Cascara at a far cheaper price point, I do think sounds timbrally more coherent than this because that's single dynamic driver. So that's what just happens with single dynamic drivers. But in its price point, it's a very good IM. Now, overall, is this a recommended buy? I would certainly say so. But of course, like with every other IM, I would not give this, a blind buy recommendation, because nothing should get a blind buy recommendation, or most things should not get a blind buy recommendation. I do think it requires a amount of auditioning. And if you want to understand some comparisons, like compared to the IE900, Sennheiser IE900, I would say this is more linear sounding. It's not as bright in the treble, but the IE900 also has more bass impact and tighter bass. The Helios is just as insane in terms of technicality, the Symphonium Helios. This is not as resolving as the Helios, but it doesn't have the brightness of Helios. So it does sound a little more palatable for a wider range and type of audiophiles, and I think. And Helios, rather, is a bit bass tilted. This is slightly more linear, like I said. The Sony IER-Z1R, which is more expensive than this, I think $600 more expensive than this. The Sony IER-Z1R doesn't have the mid-range of this. I think this has a little more soul in the mid-range, because the Sony mid-range for the Z1R sounds ever so slightly dry and clinical to me, but the Sony more than makes it for that with a great soundstage and a superlative bass. So overall, guys, this does make for a very interesting entry by Kinera. It's beautiful, so if looks matter to you, that's that. Although I would not recommend using it with this IC Blue stock cable, as pretty as it is. Not because it's got memory, which it does, but it's not that bad. But I would recommend cable rolling, because once I cable rolled, I was able to get maximum performance out of this. And my impressions, honestly, are based on using this IM with this superlative cable from Toxic Cables. Guys, I bought this cable with my own money a long time ago. I've never gotten around to talking about this. I don't mean to big this up or publicize this for no reason. This was just lying around. I bought this a while ago, and then I paired this cable with these IMs, and the results were magnificent. Hence, I do think it's worth a mention. That's for me, guys. I hope this review was useful. Kinera Verdandi is a solid IM for the price point, and I do recommend it, but I do also recommend you audition first before deciding to buy. I'll leave a link in the description section of this video in case you want to buy this. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for the next one. Bye-bye.